everyone. I'm Stacey Wilson-Hunt, and welcome to today's installment of Half Hour with HBO's Perry Mason. With us today, we have the following talent: creator, executive producer, and writer Ron Fitzgerald, creator, executive producer, and writer Rolin Jones, director and executive producer Tim Van Patten, executive producer Susan Downey, producer and lead actor Matthew Rhys, costume designer Emma Potter, and production designer John P. Goldsmith. Welcome, everyone. That was quite a feat to have everyone join us today. Congratulations to all of you. The show is a really wonderful, insane, wonderful addition to the year. So congratulations to all of you. I'm sure it was an enormous effort pulling this off. Before we talk about Perry Mason, I would love to roll the trailer for all of our viewers today. So let's take a look.
Mr. Mason, certain matters require discretion and finesse. That's the kind of thing you're good at. Wear your good suit.
This is my good suit.
You're a detective, Mr. Mason.
It's a fancy word for a busybody, but yes.
It's very easy for you to break the rules, isn't it? And you never accept any help.
How about I have a look? You stay in the truck.
Shut up.
Start the car! How can we help you, Mr. Baggerly?
Members of my church. An unspeakable act has visited upon them.
Kidnapping gone way wrong. Worst thing you ever seen.
What do you know what I've seen?
We do what we don't like when there's a greater good to be served. You more than anyone should know that.
The devil put Charlie Dodson in this box.
Mr. Mason, it's hard to believe that you're the right person for the job.
I'm the only person for this job. All they've got is innuendo and circumstance.
We have to go after him! Why are you digging so hard?
It's the way I play the game.
You want to know things, Mr. Mason. You want to prove things. What comfort has that ever given you?
Blessed be the man who will gather evidence against the devil.
You're saying the police are involved?
The cops, the church, everybody.
Blessed be the man who will snap this devil's neck.
I'm just about out of moves.
You said just about out of moves. So what's the move?
That's a great trailer, by the way. Well done to whoever cut that trailer. It really hits all the marks. So Susan, I was intrigued to learn that adapting the IP of Perry Mason had actually been something long gestating on your slate with your husband, Robert. And I was curious, what form had it taken early on that didn't take off, essentially, and how did that morph into this incredible iteration and working with Ron and Rolin?
So when Perry came to us, we had a deal at Warner's on the feature side, and it was brought with the idea of doing it as a feature. And initially it was posited as doing present day, which I'm sure had its merits because, you know, people hadn't seen it like that. But immediately Robert said, I want to do it, go back to the source material, but do it in the time of the books, which is 1930s Los Angeles. We really thought, you know, this was actually a time period and a location we hadn't seen. We always ask ourselves, like, what haven't we seen? What opportunity is there? And, you know, LA Confidential was like early 50s and, you know, Chinatown was late 30s. And it's such a rich period of history, which is fantastic, but that also affected the trajectory because we tried to do it as a feature and there was just way too much. It was so rich, the characters were great. The arenas were great. We decided to pivot over and do it as a series. And that's when we brought in Rolin and Ron, and Rolin, as a born and bred Angelino, immediately took to it. And with them, we evolved into, you know, the series, and Tim came on, and well, actually Matthew came on and then Tim came on. So it was just such a thrill for us to be able to then get this whole group of people who could bring something that was so authentic, which was the key thing, which is like, let's set it in the 30s, but let's let's have it feel like a real lived in 30s. And let's look at what's happening in the time with all the corruption and the sort of media celebrity religion and all of that kind of super stuff. And then Rolin and Ron figured out how to actually weave it into an interesting set of characters and stories. And then Tim and John and Emma and everyone helped bring it to life. But at the center, of course, there was Matthew, who really embodied Perry and gave him this incredible, for a Welsh guy, I mean, he's just a killer actor. There is also this incredible timeless quality, because it was important that every aspect of it felt legitimate. We never wanted to feel like we were putting it on. We didn't want it to feel like people were wearing costumes or were in a set, and we didn't want the actor to feel anachronistic. And so, you know, it took a while. I think we definitely, it was a long path. I think from the time the first phone call of you want to do Perry Mason came in to when it came out was like 10 years. Wow. It didn't feel that way. If you'd asked me, I would, it was like maybe 4 or 5 years, but I think it was more than worth the wait.
I would say so. And for Ron and Rolin, what scared you, but it also attracted you to this feat? Because not only do we have this sensibility about Perry Mason, the TV series, you want people to divorce themselves from that, but then you're also bringing to light a whole series of books. So how are you mining that territory for inspiration, but also creating a story wholesale?
Right. So you set up the right. So you get it's all like a search for real estate, right? So right, there's the beloved television show, which gives you the piece of pie, makes the person confess, you know, at the end of 60 minutes. Right. They're the books that are where Perry Mason in the first 7 books doesn't appear in court in 3 or 4 of them. And then there is the demand that HBO wants for their particular audience. And you're trying to take those 3 things and see if you can find some little bit of new real estate, because eventually you're going to have, you know, a Welsh guy playing the lead, and you know, that's already again some headache there. So that's what it is. You're just trying to like justify why bring this IP back by doing something new and aggressive.
So it's interesting. You talk about what HBO needs for its audience. What specifically were you working on from that model? What does the HBO audience need and expect from its shows? Because there really is a wonderful blueprint for everything that the network puts together.
Jeez.
Your turn, Vince.
Yeah, right? Dragons, I think. Pretty much, you've got to have dragons, which we had, but they got cut.
Sure. I can tell those missing, they're like gaping holes where I know that the dragons were.
So. It took us a while. We were like, you know, doing some Braveheart stuff. And then we were like, well, wait, maybe World War I's more appropriate.
Right.
No, I just think there's a certain scale. I mean, you know, and that's why Tim is so absolutely key to the entire process, because, you know, Tim has worked on all their excellent shows and done excellent work. And so he understands what's required. So when it comes to mapping out these and choreographing these insane pieces that we're doing, you know, it's key to have a guy like Tim there who knows how to do it, knows what's needed.
And Ron, how long did it take you to actually have a pilot script? How many months or years did it take to cull through all the existing IP, but then again, creating something totally fresh?
I want to say, I don't know, Ron, it was like at least a year, wasn't it, ish?
I think, well, you know, maybe first draft in 6 months, but then lots of, you know, it's like anything with a pilot. It's got to exist on its own, but then it's also got to, like, you know, set the map for where you're going. And so that everybody can take that leap to not only, okay, 2 and 3, but start talking about, you know, production building and all that stuff. And, you know, just trying to figure out what you like and what you don't like. And you know, getting feedback from the dramaturgy from the Downeys and from HBO. So I don't know, 6 months to a year, like that. Something for the first.
I mean, a lot of that process was, I mean, the big thing for us, I think, was when we finally stumbled upon the idea of making a prequel, which freed us up a lot, because we couldn't figure out, like, you watch that Raymond Burr thing and it's great for what it is. It's fantastic. You know, it's beloved. And you're like, well, we're not just going to redo that. What are you going to do? How did he become that guy? It's never said in the books. So we became fascinated with that. Like, well, how does this guy become this guy?
But in the books, he's like a really good detective. He's running around doing stuff. He's like, Where did he learn this at law school? So it actually seemed pretty clear that he had come from, had a certain skill set before he put the suit on.
Right. And so it became a bit of an origin story before the prequel, than before the Perry that we know and love, essentially, at that point. Yeah. And did the two of you write in tandem? Or what is the logistical plan for how are you trading scripts? I'm always fascinated to see how people write together, because it's never easy, I have a feeling.
I think there was a lot of that. I mean, we would do different, like whoever had like, oh, I know this one, I got this scene. Oh, great, go do it, you know? I think we just kind of, whatever someone was really feeling the passion for, they just went and did.
You're making this all sound very simple, Ron, and I know it's not.
That's our job, make it sound simple, right?
Yes, well, you did a great job. It feels very seamless. So I do want to talk to Tim and John, because I feel like the world building aspect of the show is so impressive, because it not only builds upon these sensibilities that Susan mentioned, the Chinatown of it all, LA Confidential, these points of reference that we already have for noir that's set in LA, which is so different because it's sun-drenched. So it's like pretty, but it's grotesque. It's not like these dark, rainy alleys in New York, because you have to sort of contend with all this light while also making it very dark and gory and scary. So Tim and John, I would love to know, what was your first meeting like when you talked about the aesthetic, the tone, what you wanted to do, but what you wanted to avoid? So maybe Tim, you can begin.
Well, we just wanted to give a bit of a nod to noir, but not be consumed by it, I guess. Make it less heightened and over stylized, and make it more visceral and contrasty and experiential, boots on the ground type of thing, as we said under the fedora.
I like that.
And of course, it's the idea was sort of to bring the world on the page onto the screen, and that's hiring the right department heads and everybody getting on the same page, and we just started the process of going through references, and you start in an empty office with nothing on the walls. By the time you leave, there's no room to pin anything, and you're all inspiring each other all the time, and it was really one of the most pleasant experiences I ever had in my career.
I love that. And I'm so curious, because obviously anyone watching this does think of Boardwalk, mainly because Shea Wiggum, and we see familiar faces popping up, all dressed to the nines. But I'm wondering, what did you learn making Boardwalk that you found was transferable to this series, but also what wasn't? Because it is a different time, it's a different setting, the logistics of where you're shooting. It seems like you're using a lot more real locations on this show than you did on Boardwalk.
Yeah, well, Boardwalk takes place in Jersey, and we actually built a boardwalk in Brooklyn.
Right.
And the show is much
I went
more,
there, I visited that. Yeah, it's very cool.
The world is much more proscenium and rich, and I just want to strip that down and sort of go the opposite direction, deconstruct that perhaps. And yeah, the ensemble of it all, and the multiple storylines was so terrific, and the cast is amazing. I mean, goes on and on. You don't do these things alone, so.
Yes, very clearly. And John, your takeaway from Tim's vision was what? And also, what did you bring to the table where you said, okay, I know that you have this thing that you want to do, but let's get kind of crazy. Let's think out of the box. What was your craziest idea that you brought in?
Oh my goodness. Let me start with the first question. I remember
yes, please do.
Like Tim does, where the material itself had a sense of noir about it that we knew we wanted to get into, without necessarily laying on top of that anything that was sort of graphic about noir. So the things that you think of in the spirit of that, long shadows that fall across characters and things like that, black and white, heavy contrast. It wasn't so much about that as it was the grittiness of the material. And we started with these police crime scene photographs from the period that were a fantastic reference for me and for us in our conversation of where we wanted to go, what we wanted to be. That was so rich that we could just draw from and run with. So we had, I think it was Ron who said there was a scale about this whole project, which was remarkable. And the number of locations we had and the sets that we built All of that in and of itself with the material that we had to work from was fantastic. Didn't really need to get crazy. We had to find our sweet spot between historically accurate on the one hand and cinematic on the other. And we found that Tim had some fantastic ideas about, let's say the Radiant Assembly, and looking at Billy Sunday, revival references for the spirit of it, and building what we called a bowl of humanity and lighting it like a George Bellows painting, a boxing ring. And, everything had its thinking about it in that way that wasn't crazy. It was so rich, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And tell me a little bit about the logistics of pulling off these enormous scenes on the streets of Los Angeles with all the old cars and all these incredible crowd scenes. And I mean, it really is just such a stunning scale just in terms of the logistics of that. Was it difficult shooting in LA in that way?
I would have to say, I'm so glad I'm not a first AD, because that would have been terrible. For us, and the weeks of prep that goes into dressing downtown, that was a big deal, largely because of traffic patterns and the hours that you're allowed to work.
Right.
We had a bunch of scenes. It always seemed to work out with hanging awnings and changing out street signs and removing, stuff that is basic urban infrastructure, streetscape stuff like bus stops and benches and trash cans and mailboxes. But we had a great team, thankfully, who was able to do that. So you get into a groove. As you're starting out, there's nothing really daunting about it. There's just this idea of, the fire hose is pointed at your face and you're being told to drink. So, okay, we'll figure it out, and you do, and then you move through it, and it becomes I think we were lucky. We had a kind of well-oiled machine, if I'm right, and it just was.
I did not see any errant water bottles in any scene. So you guys are, you
No
did very well on
Starbucks.
that.
Good, I'm glad.
That's always a plus. And Matthew, you've been referred to as a Welsh actor, sort of in a pejorative way during this conversation. So I'm wondering, are your feelings hurt being referred to in such a casual manner? But in general, what attracted you to this role? You had just wrapped your Emmy-winning run on The Americans, which was in its way also very dark, a period piece, very different. What was it about this character in this world that made you say yes?
Just reading the script was, enough. And certainly having the conversation, with Susan and Ron Rolin about who this person was and where they saw him going, I was in from the beginning, because it was so incredibly rich. His backstory was not just laid out for you, but also seen. It was one of those. It was a kind of a lazy actor's dream. All the backstories prepared for you and done, and then halfway through this incredible change for Perry, which you're allowed to do as an actor in real time. So, right. Me starting the first day of court, I was, as an actor and as Perry, starting my first day in court. So regardless of how bad I was, it was all just helping and aiding me incredibly. But, just the richness of who he is and everything that's going on, and the bases they loaded for him and all that there was there to play, it wasn't a difficult decision for me.
And how familiar were you with this character? Or even I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit, I didn't even know that it was a book series before the show. So I didn't know about this other, era of this character. How much did you know before this?
The show did very well in Britain. I remember the reruns being on, and this vague memory of him kind of always getting someone on the stand, but I had no real pinpoint accurate recollection of the television show, which is good, because I just know I would have stolen it in person. But yes, I kind of had this image that he was just like in a white suit all the time.
Right.
The white suit came from, and I was like, I'm not sure. What did you say then?
That's Matlock, the white suit.
Oh, that's what. It wasn't Matlock. I do remember Mason being on. But yes, I just like to confuse my TV greats. However, initially I was like, what? I was like, because the way it was worded to me is like, you want to remake Perry Mason? I was like, why would you want to remake Perry Mason? And it wasn't a remake. It was a very definitive reimagining. And and a very interesting one.
I agree.
Yeah.
It does feel like very, very, very new and unlike anything I've ever seen, which is really wonderful. And Emma, the costumes, my God, just I'm speechless even trying to describe them. And there's something about this era in American history that's always fascinated me, which is no matter who you are, how much money you have, your race, where you're from, there was a fastidiousness to the way everyone put themselves together and sort of based on whatever resources they had. And I love how you've captured that, but also I love how you've spoken in the last few months about capturing the wear and tear of a lot of these clothes. So tell me a little bit about the aging process, how difficult it was to make garments, but then make them look old. I just can't imagine the scale of just that piece of your process. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was part of what drew me to the project in the beginning was, and so much of that was mentioned in the script and in the early discussions, both with Tim and with Matthew and also John, just about wanting that to be there. So it was in the back of my mind and a part of our focus while we were moving forward with everything. It just took a lot of time. And so we would start very early with fittings with Matthew. I think we started trying on vintage clothing so that we could find who Perry was in the beginning wearing clothing that was already old. Inevitably, we would have to build for him because we needed so many of the costumes, but to be able to give Matthew pieces to try on that were vintage, that had lived other lives before he was wearing them, which was often how we decided Perry would find the clothing. There was that wonderful beat in the script about him getting the garments from the people in the morgue. So he had the opportunity to have clothing that came from all over the place. So everything could kind of live its own life before it got to him. And then from there we would build and we would wear the clothing down. We had a team of people that would just be sanding and steaming and kind of doing physical labor onto these garments and then painting them or over dyeing them, and then we'd refit. And we just went through this process quite a few times. You know, I remember one of the kind of middle fittings with Matthew, like putting the leather jacket on and deciding we needed to go further. And we would go in and put a cigarette burn exactly here on the sleeve and just these little details to find a way for the clothing to tell a story that was already there on the person without having to explain it.
Wow. And do you have any sense of how many pieces total you constructed for season one?
No, I don't. I remember going into the first church scene that we did and figuring out there was about 130 custom made pieces in the set that we had built. And then I think we figured out at the end, we had done about 10 to 11,000 costumes if you considered all the background, all the changes.
Wow.
Since then, it's made everything feel like, oh, that's fine. It's not a big deal. That's it's fine. So it was a lot, you know, but like John said, you really got into a routine with it and you became kind of just working through it in a machine kind of way.
Wow. Again, you're also making this seem a little too, you're all just pros at making this all seem too easy. It's such an impressive thing, really. And I'm wondering, was there a day or an episode or a scene that you look back on now and you think, oh my God, I can't believe we executed that. Maybe it was you were battling weather, you were battling daylight, crowd problems, car problems. Was there anything that comes to mind? And feel free, anyone can jump in.
Well, we made a decision to do the probably the biggest set piece in the entire series. In the first shot. The charge across the no man's land in World War I.
Yes.
Figuring that would either galvanize us or sink us completely. So it was really a test for every department, from top to bottom, everybody. And it went great. It went great.
But it was so hot that day. I remember Matthew was in all, I mean, Emma, you can speak to what that uniform was, but like it was layers upon layers of wool. And it was bright sunlight, like you were talking earlier. It's Los Angeles, we're filming it there. And like, it was beaming down and he had the best attitude about it. And I was like, I remember going to set and seeing that the first day and then seeing those dailies. And I was like, we're going to be okay. Cause I mean, it was just such a steady hand with Tim, and again, all the departments delivered. And at the core, you had Matthew, who was like unflinchable. He was just running time again and time again. And meanwhile, like all of us just standing by monitors, were like, oh my God, what are we gonna do?
I can tell you where the attitude was galvanized, because all the extras on that were all veterans, and a lot of them were special forces veterans. And
Wow.
very early on, I remember saying, "Oh, it's so hot," and one of them just went, "It was much hotter in Afghanistan," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, sure it was." And so that was it. Then there was nothing to be said after that.
Right. That's when you remember, oh, I'm playing pretend for a living. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. I won't say anything else.
And finally, as we all continue to rely on our small screens to guide us through the next few months of uncertainty, what would you tell people who hadn't had a chance to watch the series? What's the biggest selling point to people now for a reason to tune in? What do you think is the most gripping piece for a viewer? And anyone can offer that up.
I pretty much shame anyone who hasn't seen it yet, because I have such confidence. Look, we've all been part of a lot of productions, and I don't know that there's anything else I've ever been a part of where I have zero hesitation, no matter who I'm talking to advocate for watching the show, because just top to bottom, from the storytelling to the look to the performances, it's so rich, and it transports you to a whole other world, which I think we can all use a little bit of that now. And again, I don't care if you're a teenager or you're, a septuagenarian or whatever, you're going to find something in this show that you love. And so I guess that's not really a selling point, shaming someone, but
hey, it works. It works.
I'll say something. I'll say this. With movies and streaming and TV kind of all merging into one thing. Tim Van Patten directed 5 out of these 8. And me and Ron were so thrilled when Tim decided to come on, because he had done all the TV shows that we loved and what made us the writers that we are. And so arguably that body of work that he has is as big and as expansive and as huge and as respectable of any director walking on earth. And if you hadn't seen him in 5 or 6 years or something like this, you should watch this. It's a true master.
Thanks.
At the helm.
I like that. Well, I want to thank all. Oh, go ahead.
I just have to say, it's not me, just me. I mean, honestly, for Pete's sakes, this crew, and we have to mention David Franco and Downey, cinematographers, and the whole camera department. Everybody, I mean, was performing at their best, and it was just a pleasure. I mean, honestly.
I love talented people being able to do their jobs and enjoying themselves while they do it. That's very inspiring.
Yes, I was going to say, who's more humble, Matthew or Tim?
I don't know.
We took a bet. We took a bet for the entire year as to who could be the most humble. And once this damned year is over, you shall see my arrogance.
When I let him out of my basement, because he's locked in my basement.
Yes, this is fake light. It's not real sunlight.
Well, please bring him some water and food, Tim. We need him for season 2. Well, thank you all for being here. Congratulations again, and stay safe and healthy. We really are very thankful for your time. And for people watching today from couch, office chair, if you're able to go into an office sofa, please know that we're thankful for you tuning in, and please enjoy Perry Mason if you haven't had a chance to see it. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.